So this is, you want to hear the kind of feedback that your audience gives. So recently, here in China, in Ningbo, I organized a special screening of my film for the PhD and master's students and my staff members. And when the film ended, I asked people to share their comments, and it was kind of silence. And then one Chinese girl, a master's student, she gets up and she says, Jai Bhim. And I was like, do you understand what you're saying? She says, yes, I'm understanding. And I got your film. And I want to say, and I acknowledge to you by saying Jai Bhim. It is a person who has never heard about caste, never knew how the Indian system works. And then getting a reaction from a Chinese girl saying Jai Bhim, it was the best possible compliment a film can get for me, for my film. All right. So I felt very moved. And the next day I get an email from another colleague of mine, a Britisher from London. And he said, Vikrant, I've been living in London for, I was born in London and I've been living here for so many years and I've been communicating with the Indian community, but I never knew about what caste is. And through you, I got to know about it. And when I watched the movie, I started this conversation within my, groups and my community that we should understand caste system better. And I said, this is what I want. What else do you want, from your film? These are the kind of reactions, and that made me feel that at least, even with no budget or whatever, my protagonist, people who featured in the film, and if we are able to tell a story or at least motivate people with understanding caste, our work is done to some extent.
Yeah. Amazing.
Does caste travel with migration, or does it simply change its surroundings? What follows us when we cross oceans? Caste is not only a system, it becomes habit, everyday choices.
I see caste as the mother of all inequalities, in the sense that it is one that can encompass all kinds of inequality systems. It racializes people and dehumanizes people and degrades people.
If no one names it, does caste disappear? Or does denial allow it to continue?
Not only do we face discrimination based on gender, we also face discrimination based on caste. And then also vice versa, where within our community, we are victims of patriarchy.
The road to Sydney led to new voices. Further north, the landscape changed. A quiet coastal town. On the return journey, others were organizing, turning experiences into collective action.
We have really troubling stories where people are thrown out of their rental accommodation as soon as they are discovered as belonging to marginalized groups or caste-oppressed communities.
Back in Melbourne, the work continues. Spaces built on dignity and the courage to confront hierarchy.
We generally ask, what's your name? But people ask, what's your surname? What's your family name?
We Dalit express ourselves in Australia through Ambedkarite events, poetry, activism, and simply by refusing to be invisible.
The journey began with a question. It leads to many more. Perhaps equality begins with resistance.
Jai Bhim, Namaskar, Warame. Welcome to a special episode of OutCaste. Today, we're excited to have with us a prominent filmmaker, academic, and anti-caste activist, Vikrant Kishore. We'll be discussing his upcoming documentary, Resisting Casteism in Australia, which is premiering on 19 July at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. Welcome to OutCaste, Vikrant. So great to have you.
Welcome, Vikrant. Thank you for joining us today to talk about your new documentary.
Thanks, Apurva, and thanks, Meenakshi, for inviting me here today. And I'm very pleased to talk about my new documentary.
Vikrant, let's start with you. Tell us about yourself and your background.
All right, before I start, firstly, I would like to say Jai Bhim, and I would always like to start my discussion of my film by acknowledging the long-standing struggles of the Dalits, Adivasis, and the indigenous people all around the world. Since I've been in Australia for more than 20 years now, one thing I realized that our struggles and the struggles of the indigenous Australians are more or less the same. The stories of struggle all over the world, especially of the marginalized, there runs a common thread. And these stories are huge, but storytellers are handful. And that's why it's important for us to talk about them and acknowledge them and their struggles. And with that, I would like to start.
What inspired you to make this documentary?
Yeah, as I said, the stories of the marginalized. And it is always looked through the lens of people who are sympathetic, empathetic, but never the marginalized. Okay. So always the stories are either, that so-called, we always use this term that, the white savior or the hero or the high caste who has an empathy towards things. And that's what the kind of stories has been said. Because marginalized are always victims. Can marginalized have their own stories? Can marginalized be the heroes? Can they be the ones what we want to see them to be? Just human, just people who have their dignity, who have, their own self-pride, who can assert themselves, who can, raise their head and say what they are, what their feelings are. So those are the kind of things. So what inspired me? Multiple inspirations. But what troubled me, it's not the inspiration, but what troubled me is that when you travel to a different part of the world, of course, my roots are Indian. I call myself as an Indian Australian. So I carry both. I'm proud of, being Indian, and I'm proud of being an Australian. And coming to Australia, I realized that, one challenge that whole lot of Indians face is about racism. And every second person I would talk to, and they had a story of their own racism, which I always empathize. I always, I'm an activist by nature, so I will always raise my voice to fight for others if they have been discriminated in any way. But the same thing I said, that what is happening is that those kind of microaggressions, micro prejudices, micro discrimination that you see in diasporic communities when it comes to caste, in terms of deciding between us versus them, it is still inherent, it is out there. And it can start with something, a very basic conversation like, hey, what's your surname? What does it mean? Where do you come from? Those kind of queries. Those queries are not simple queries as to, hey, so where you come from? Oh, I'm also from Delhi. Oh, yeah, that's good. But the moment it's something to know about your caste, who you are, where do you belong? Do you fit in that category or not? All right, that fitting thing. Or are you fit enough to be considered a friend or be invited in a friend circle? All those things are problematic. And that's where those troubles over the years, somewhere I wanted to tell the story. And, the push, I would say, in 2020, Hathras was the case where these girls were, killed in the name of caste. And that was the time when I organized a Zoom meeting of community like-minded people to express our, anger. And that was the time lots of people came and talked about and shared their experience with caste in Australia. And I said, these conversations that I'm having with myself or some of the people that I'm having conversations with, who I think is just in close circle, but those same voices are coming from different corners because that Zoom meeting had attendees from Sydney, from Perth, from Darwin and different places, and I could hear the stories. So what happened that soon after that, the Australian Human Rights Commission invited public submission to broaden its anti-racism policy. And then that's where we started having discussion as to, can we put caste to be recognized within the anti-racism framework? And we started making policy framework, and we put in the anti-racism framework to the AHRC, and we had a meeting. So some of our group members from the Humanism Project, from the Periyar Ambedkar, with Thought Group, Thought Circle, they all organized a meeting with the AHRC people. And one of the things the AHRC representative said, that we keep hearing about caste as an issue, but we don't see stories, we don't see people coming out and talking about this, so we don't hear from the people who are from the marginalized communities, and it would be good to hear their stories. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And initially my idea was to make a web series, and then suddenly I thought maybe we have to have more impact and go out more to the community, and that's how the film started coming into a certain form.
Thanks, Vikrant. Before we delve deeper into the actual movie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's your background and how you've come to this work.
Yeah, I'm Vikrant Kishore. I'm an academic and a filmmaker. I teach media. I've been into filmmaking. I come from India. My home state is Jharkhand, but I lived and studied and everything. Mostly it happened in Delhi. So I call Delhi as my kind of a home because I feel more comfortable with Delhi because all my family and friends are there. And I did my graduation from St. Stephen's College back in Delhi University, and then I did my master's in mass communication filmmaking from Jamia Millia Islamia in Mass Communication Research Center. And that is where I started making films that was close to me, So as part of our master's course, we were supposed to make documentaries, we were supposed to make films. So my two documentaries, one was fiction, a fictional documentary, and it was a fiction film. I titled it as Pehchan. Pehchan means identity. It was about my own kind of battle with my own identity. Okay, the identity of being from a privileged family, a powerful family, a family who never saw any kind of marginalization. But we were marginalized in a different way because of a certain caste thing. So every time in school I faced those kind of casteism and all, and I would always question, why is this happening? Because I'm much better than most of the people who are there. And that's why somewhere, especially after Mandal Commission, caste became a very talked about thing, and people would always wanting to look at who's from scheduled caste, who is a tribal, and in school people started judging you. And that's where in class 11th and 12th I started hiding it because there was too much of judging. So I started hiding, and that happened at the university also when I was in St. Stephen's College. But then, the moment the admission list is there, you are already marked who you are. So people knew that I was trying to hide, and the more I was trying to hide who I was, the more the attacks became, terrible. Even in fisticuffs and fights and all those things, or people writing caste slur in my hostel room door, with chalk. So those happened, and then finally I owned, and I said, I'm trying to fit in, or I'm trying to say that, listen, I'm trying to avoid being discriminated, but then that discrimination is never ending. And in a way, in a kind of a manner to accept who I was, I thought I'll make my first film, and the film is going to be my story that, hey, listen, I tried to hide myself, but then no, there's no hiding. You have to own it. You have to talk about it. And that's where the discussion started. It started with a 5-minute fiction film. Then it moved on to a larger documentary when I was in final year. And then we decided to do a documentary called Yatharth, The Fact. And Yatharth, and then we looked at 3 different protagonists, 2 Dalits who were beaten up in the university, one from Jamia, one from Delhi University, and an upper caste student who believed in beating up Dalits and who believed in that caste should be there. So we found these protagonists, and everybody agreed to talk. And that's where I met Ratan Lal, because he was discriminated against at that point of time, and he became a protagonist. And in my film, I actually used my documentary to tell the story when it started in 1998. And then I go back to Ratan Lal in 2025 after 27 years, and I talk to him. Has anything changed? And Ratan has become, he is an associate professor at Delhi University. He's also the spokesperson for Congress Party in India. So he has achieved, and he's been an activist, and it gave me a very good arc. None of this was planned. I never thought that after 25 years, 26 years, I'll be making a film on caste, and Ratan never thought that he'll be featuring again in a film that is kind of a full in a kind of a film's arc. And that's how the film starts with Ratan's story, ends with Ratan's interview, and that's how I place that. It starts from India, goes to Australia, and goes back to India.
That's amazing. Between Pehchan and Yatharth to coming to resisting casteism in Australia, what impact has making this documentary made on you personally?
Personally, making this documentary, it makes you feel that there is so much to be do, so much to be talked about, and it also makes you feel that you are scared. I feel scared that how much should I come out? How much should I, talk about it? How much my identity should be not about Vikrant Kishore, the filmmaker, Vikrant Kishore, the academic, but Vikrant Kishore as someone who comes from a marginalized community. And I don't want that particular identity to be the forefront of my particular identity. It is part of me. I'll talk about it as an activist, as an academic, as a filmmaker. But then somewhere you have to make a choice, and I have to make that choice, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes very boldly, sometimes in terms of assertion, and sometimes I have to make sure that that identity is also not playing into the professional that I am. So it is a balancing act, what has, changed. But most importantly, the issue of casteism hasn't changed. The problem is that what we face in India, there is a big difference between casteism in India. In India, casteism can also have the aspect of violence, that if somebody doesn't like you or your caste, the everyday violence that is perpetuated in India, it is so rampant. It is so rampant that, just 2 weeks back, there was this, this couple, the girl from an upper caste and the boy from a Dalit community. They married, and the family invited the girl's parents and brother, they invited her husband to come and talk to them so that they would resolve. And what they did, their plan was not to resolve the issue. They tortured him. They put, they beat him up. They tortured him. They killed him. Why? Because he came from a marginalized community. If you hear on an everyday basis, every time a Dalit groom who wants to take a horse for his marriage, if they want to ride a horse, just to show, because you have different ways. But that, going on to a horse for them, for marriage is also a caste pride, because people from a certain community says that these are the caste pride from a specific warrior community only. They can do that. How dare you do that? And they can be stone pelted. So there was this case where police was protecting them, and yet even the police were being stone pelted. But these are direct violence. Coming to Australia, where you see the indirect microaggression, indirect ways of continuing the caste. Maybe even if it is, you're saying, oh, it's my culture and we are just going to marry in our caste, in our community. Okay, that is your prerogative. But that shouldn't be on the basis that you want to filter out certain caste, or you say caste no bar, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, please do not apply. So what is caste no bar? Because again, you are using your upper caste status. You want to marry within that upper caste, so-called, graded inequality. You want to do that. So those are the problems. And then, one thing which is common about asking for surname, asking for identity, using casteist slur. It happens so often, even in Australia, among the South Asian community, using casteist slur against each other. If you want, you come to a foreign nation and you own it, So for me, I call myself an Australian, Indian Australian. That's India is my root. But at the end of the day, Australian values run, that is what I have accepted. And we also admire the kind of multiculturalism that we have, the kind of liberal society it has, and also we understand how much people are fighting against racism. And every day you meet another Indian and they will have some story about some direct, indirect racism. Hey, if you can see racism, if you are a victim of racism, or somewhere you say that, hey, the jobs keep going to the whites and you are just getting only the left behind thing, why can't you take a look inside you? Does caste in any way rule you, your head, or decide things for you? If it is doing that, then think again when you talk about racism, because you are not doing enough It has to start with us. It has to start with you. Because it can't go that one thing you can say is bad and another thing you practice. Humanity doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And just going back to what you mentioned about the casteism in India is very violent. And I think in terms of film, it has been documented in film. But I think Sairat was the first example where people really took notice of what caste-based violence really looks like. I think it was just such a well-made film, and it showed reality so pertinently that was the first time when people really thought about what caste violence looks like, and it was more mainstream. It's been more mainstream since then. And
So
oppressive caste violence. Yeah.
Also
And also
gender.
yes, that's right. Yeah.
It is wrong to say something like Sairat was the one which opened people's eye. No, caste violence is every day. Everybody sees it. They ignore it. It doesn't mean a film shows it that suddenly people are opening their eyes. People are not opening their eyes. People are blind. They are caste blind. They only use caste or think about caste when it comes in front of their door. Sairat becoming very popular, or any other film. If you look at the popularity of any of these films which has caste stories, these are the films which who go to watch these films. It is the the marginalized people who go to watch these films. It is their particular ticket buying capacity that fill up the theater. People who are casteist, people who do not like these stories, they don't even enter enter the theater. So you are very wrong that opened. Yeah, it can just get some critics to talk about it, but it isn't enough. It isn't enough, and unfortunately, you see the same thing. Sairat is a Marathi film. It hasn't gone to the mainstream. So the Hindi, the mainstream film, Dhadak, it was so much diluted. The caste angle was totally taken away from it. So when I was watching, and I was like, what is happening? It's like Dhadak 2 somewhat does it again. Dhadak 2 also takes from a Tamil film, Periyaram Perumal, and Periyaram Perumal, and again it also dilutes the film. It isn't. And then again, you have to have a brown face, So you take a Chaturvedi, and then if he is a bit fair, you turn him as a brown boy, because you can't find a Dalit actor to do that. Even if you don't find a Dalit actor, why do you have to put them as brown? Brown face. You haven't seen. Is Dalit meaning someone is from Dalit community? Does it mean they have to be very dark? Or they have to be, really meek looking. They have to be someone really, really, improv, in a kind of a way that generally people think like the beggar should be the kind of Dalit representation every time. The Indian beggar style. Like I remember once in the university, I was walking in the corridor and there was this guy. He said, "Hey, are you a Rajput?" I said, "Why?" "No, you walk like a Rajput. I don't think you are a Rajput, but why do you have a Rajput style of walking?" I said, "Who decides how can your walk tell someone about your caste?" But then that was a very direct way of discriminating against you by telling me that I know who you are, so you better tone down. And that is the way in India, that it can be direct. Whereas in Australia, people want to be politically correct, okay? Because they travel between the very fine lines, because they have to use the color. Hey, we are being discriminated on the basis of color. So it's easy to say, hey, you are white, we are brown, and you. So multicultural representation has to be there. You give us political representation, but we will cry about the reservation that happens in India. We want affirmative action back here in Australia. We want everything. We want to build our temple. We want to build our Gurudwara. We want free lands for everything, but we don't want to do anything about our prejudice. Hey, it doesn't work like that. We have to think more. But that thinking is coming now because people like us are now talking and challenging those things which is happening. Because most of the Australians are unaware of these kind of prejudices or these kind of dynamics within the South Asian community. And lots of politicians that I talk, or even in the morning I was talking to an Australian film reviewer, and we were doing an interview, and he said, hey, I did not know anything about what I watched in your film. And it is such an informational film for me that I think it should go out so that we understand. And I said, yes, my thing is, my film is not talking to an Indian, because I know each and every Indian understand what caste is, what caste discrimination is, what is violence, how violence is perpetuated, how microaggression is there, how they practice. So my focus is not about, telling us Indians to, do not discriminate against each other. We have been telling our great leaders from Ambedkar, Gandhi, Nehru, whoever the freedom fighters, they always fought against these issues. And that's why, Ambedkar, when he put in the Indian Constitution against for affirmative action, for reservation, or for, making caste discrimination unlawful, or bringing all these laws, it was all supported by all the political parties and all the big leaders. And that's how Indians started enjoying their freedom, because caste was in a way outlawed, caste discrimination was outlawed. But that is still on paper. The good thinking of that has still not translated what is being practiced today. So if people say, hey, caste discrimination is there in India, hasn't government done anything? I said, government has done lots of things, and because of that, we have access to education, we have access to, jobs, we have access to so many things which earlier wouldn't have been there, or certain kind of mindset, conservative mindset, could have totally destroyed that. But the Indian government, the constitution guarantees that, and that's what we should be thankful to. But it's not only about being thankful, it's about how we continue those discussions and talk so that people are aware.
Yeah. So what kind of challenges did you face while shooting this film? And also, do you think that we have very less representation in the film industry to show our stories?
Absolutely. Challenges, there are multiple challenges. First of all, as a no-budget filmmaker, the budget is always a big challenge. And especially, I'll just give you a mainstream example. I was watching this, so recently, Karan Johar, he produced 2 interesting films based on caste. One was Dhadak 2, and before that he did Dhadak. And then he also produced Homebound, okay, because they have new funders and also. But then in one of his interviews, he's saying, hey, these social issues, these films are not making money, and I have to rethink about investing money in these social issues, okay. So for them, if there is no return of interest or whatever the money they have put in, then it's like, we did what we had to do, So for last 20 years, Karan Johar never bothered to do. He only did NRI style of films with all upper caste. And I wrote about that, that how Bollywood whitewashes caste in its cinema. And then you make 2 films as a kind of, lip service, and then and also which are very, very diluted, though people like it because it's not there. And so when there are no films and then you get 2 films on caste, everybody say, oh wow, they made film on caste and they did their work and everything, But then why do they have to rethink? They have multiple bombs of failures in mainstream cinema, NRI films. They might have 4 films that fail. But then nobody goes and say that I'm not going to make a film on another action film or another romantic film because it bombed. But 2 social films that discuss caste, you suddenly don't want to make any other films like that. So I felt, a bit, that's not good. But my own challenges was to find people who come out to talk. Okay, that is always a big challenge. Caste has a generational trauma. Okay, casteism among the Dalits, among the Adivasis. It has generational trauma. People don't want to come out. People don't want to be identified. And that's the truth. And I would put myself into that bracket that I don't want to be identified easily. Why should people, start judging me on the basis of a certain caste? No, I'm more than that. But then I have to take also that particular thing in mind that, yes, we have a certain responsibility. And if not I, then who is going to do it? And that's where I started looking out for people who would like to share their views. And I met groups like Ambedkar International Mission, Navayana Charitable Trust, PATCA and all. And then I started spreading word around. The first person I had a chat with was Asmita Mahire Singh. And she was one of the first person who agreed to be the part of the web series, because initially it came out as a web series. So we started shooting with her in 2021. And this was just bang during the COVID. Okay, so we had to, take lots of precautions and go out and conduct the shooting with Asmita. And then Aparna came on board in Sydney. I went and shot with Aparna, and again with the web series in mind. But later on, I started rethinking as to what to do. And then something happened and I had to change my job. And that change of job also resulted in shifting of country. I thought it was just for a couple of years and I'll, keep doing the film. But then it was not easy to go back to Australia to do the film. And then I realized that I need to have more people, and I can't make a web series because web series won't get the kind of discussion or viewership that I'm looking at, because it is a much more intense discussion. And then I reached out to more people, and then it's set as so I had 7 days in hand to go to Australia, and I said, let me make the best out of it. And in 7 days, I just took the car, started driving. So I had in Melbourne, I had Parag and Rupali. From Melbourne, I went to Sydney, the Aparna and Neeraj, further discussions. Then I moved on to Newcastle, had an expert to discuss. Then I went to Coffs Harbour, Prashant and Sangeeta. Then back to Sydney, Haroon. Then back to Melbourne, again another round of discussions with Hari Bapuji. So that it became a kind of a 7 days non-stop driving. But then it also gave me the drive to think. When you're driving for 8-9 hours straight, you're thinking. And one of the best thing which happened from the driving was about, because I enjoy music, I love music, and my musical skills are terrible. But one of the things I wanted my film to be driven was a musical, breaks in between. And then these voices, after every discussion, I used to feel angry and I used to feel a bit, what can we do? How can we help each other? And how do we create awareness? And those ideas, when it came, I penned it as a kind of a poetry or whatever you call it, and then I put that in the film, interspersed here and there. And it's my own musical thing in the film. Yeah, so the challenge was doing the shoot in 7 days. Lots of things remained, some of the things that I wanted. Then I got a crew to help me when I was in China to do some shoot. But the camera was terrible. The camera had focusing problems. So I have one interview where the focus is going out and off, and I didn't have enough money to hire another crew. So that is there. And every time I watch my film, and I'm like, why couldn't you spend a bit more, hire a crew and do that? So challenges were there. Yeah, many. These are some of those.
Maybe next time we can do it together. All.
Yes. Because I want to develop this film in a more professional manner. From a no-budget film, I want to actually put in lots of money, because the story doesn't end here. There's lots more stories to be told. So this is just the start, and we have to do. And I'm more than happy to have collaborators like you, because we need that. Yeah.
So yeah, part 2 is coming soon.
Yes. Yeah. So Vikrant, what message would you like to give to the audience through this movie? And why do you think it's important for everyone to watch it at this particular moment in time?
My message is that for people, that aspect of caste and the issue, and if you're an Australian, an Indian Australian, or just an Australian, a Greek Australian, an Italian Australian, however you want to identify, if you understand how discrimination operates, if you protest against any kind of indignity, any kind of discrimination, any kind of inhumanity, then you must understand how caste operates. It is not just a discussion. It is also a caution. It's a caution about how the Australian demographic is becoming very, very multicultural, with South Asians having more than 1 million population now, and with a projected population of more than 3 million in the next 10 years. Cultural baggage like this can create social imbalances, disharmony, problems with the social cohesion, and it can cause lots of problems, which we see in USA, in UK, where the generations of Indians being there they have a history of more than 60, 70, 80 years. In Australia, we have a history like the major wave of migration, which started from 2000 onwards. So you can only say 25 years of history. And if we don't acknowledge these issues, then how do politicians take Indians to be? Hey, yes, let's put in a grant for the color festival. Hey, let's put in grant for the lighting festival. Oh, hey, where is the next happy thing happening? But what about really serious questions? Earlier people were very, because it was happening within a certain privileged community coming in before, because not very many underprivileged communities were having access to come to Australia, because of course the Australian migration system is skewed towards people who have the money. So now only you see people from the underprivileged communities coming here. But what happened when the privileged communities came? They also faced problems. So by the 2000s, people already knew what dowry problem was. And there were cases of dowry torture and dowry problem. And they knew how the women were being treated in the Indian community. And there have been lots of activists there. So that is there. But then nobody talked about caste, which is happening now. So in Australia, it is important. And I think we have to continue the conversation. It is not about blaming people, but it is about cautioning, okay? And it is about continuing that discussion and also making people aware at a wider level that tomorrow, if you're dealing with Indian community, it is not a mono kind of a cultural community. Of course, there are politicians who want monoculturalism in Australia. Hey, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. We are multicultural and we remain that. But for us, that people who judge Indians as monocultural, it is a problem. You have to understand the cultural dynamics of the Indian community. You have to understand the divisions, and you have to understand the prejudices that can create certain problem for people who might be at the receiving end and you might not be seeing it. So probably the film tries to be that 101 lesson for people to understand that. It is just a kind of a call for that.
So is it because people don't want to live their privileges and that's why they don't acknowledge?
No, it's not about leaving their privileges, but there are so many things. Lots of times people are not even aware that how their own privileged or their own caste mindset or caste fashioning works. So sometimes they also need a nudge. And I'm so glad that in Australia in the last 10 years where I've been a bit of in the activist mode in terms of caste and race and all these kind of discrimination, is that I'm finding so many great allies from different communities, different cultural groups, and within the Indian communities, there are so many people who have come in and stood with us, and they are raising their voice on a daily basis. And lots of people who earlier were prejudiced, they come and say that, hey, Vikrant, I had that thinking and I'm really sorry about that. And people have come and apologized for either their past kind of being a bit casteist or not being able to look through that. And if you are having people come and talk to you and acknowledging that, there's nothing better than that. That's how we build allyship. And I'm always an ally, and that's what I say, that my experiences makes me more enabled to lend my voice to any other marginalized groups. When I was in Australia, every time if there was an indigenous rally, I would make sure that I'm there, because people like us can go out there and can show our support to those people who have been who were flora and faunas of the 1960s and 70s of Australia. They were not counted as human. So who else can better understand their plight than us? Because we were never treated as humans as well, So we have to be there. Yeah. So that's the thing. But one good thing I want to add, and this is a very important thing about my film, is that what makes me feel really good about Australia, or where do I connect most with Australia, is any of the Australian beaches, Australian sea, Australian seashore, where I feel alive. I can just lie there, I can just look at the sea, and I can just immerse myself into a zone where I really, and this is a connection. Long time back, when I was only 10 years old, my Nanaji, my grandfather, when he passed away, 11 years old, yeah, and his ashes were immersed in the Arabian Sea in Mumbai. And that was the time, and I wasn't there, I was in my hostel, so I could never say goodbye to him. So whenever I would go in India, of course, when you're living in Delhi or in any of the inland cities, which is not close to sea, so whenever I would get a chance to go to any of these seaside cities, Goa or Mumbai, I would always connect with my grandfather, just touching the water. And in Australia, I got that opportunity more than enough because everywhere you go, when I lived in Newcastle, we were literally next to the sea, living there, so it was wonderful. And so in my film, I always return to sea. Every story ends with a moment with the sea, because it is where I'm thinking, it is where my Australianness is coming, it is where I'm connecting with the water, it is what is keeping me moving.
That's really nice. Thank you so much, Vikrant, for taking the time to speak with us today. We can't wait to watch the film. The trailer looks great. We'll put a link to the trailer in the description. Thanks everyone for
Great.
joining us. Please do go and watch Resisting Casteism in Australia on the 19th of July in Melbourne at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival at Cinema Nova. We're looking forward to having a screening in Sydney and a few other locations around Australia as well. Vikrant, would you like to say any final words?
No, final words is that we are going to have a private screening in Sydney on 18th of July at 3 p.m. in the Regency at Auburn. So community groups can contact both Apurva and Meenakshi, and they both can facilitate your entry to the theatre. Yeah, I'm just keeping it as a community screening, but I'll also have a ticketing option in the next 2 days so that people can, whoever wants to join, they have access through the ticketing. But yeah, contact. It's going to be a free access for most of the people, unless when I put it online for ticketing, probably it might have some money to it, but that's not the thing that the film is looking for this private screening. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to OutCast. Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim.